Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, the channel that covers all types of rock genres. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today, I've got back one of my favorite guests in the hot seat, Joe B. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again. These are always a great time. And
Fantastic.
this topic, man, I'm all over this topic. So, yeah, thank you.
No problem. We are going to go back in time to 1982, and we are going to cover this little beauty, Creatures of the Night by Kiss. It's regarded in some circles as one of their finest albums. We're going to cover it top to bottom, left to right. So, Joe, what we'll do is we'll talk about our first impressions when we heard it in the day, if we did, and then we'll do maybe five or six songs. We'll go into the box set. There's a few little goodies. We can just highlight some of the bonus tracks. And I'm sure you've got a lot of anecdotes in the day that you can share with us.
This is a lot of my albums I have, too. You have about 20 copies, right? So
yes.
This is one of my copies, and it's actually signed by Vinnie Vincent. I was at the expo where he came out of hiding in 2017.
Oh, wow.
Had them sign this copy. So back, Kiss was my band, my gateway band. Kiss Alive is the reason I like hard rock and metal. Kiss Alive and Aerosmith Rocks are my two favorite albums of all time. So I was hooked. And Kiss, once you're into a band, you stay religious to them through thick and thin. And there was a lot of thin during this period. So they release Alive, then it becomes Super Kiss with Destroyer to Love Gun, Alive 2. Then they do Dynasty, which, and I know Dynasty and Unmasked was huge in your area.
Yes, it
where
was.
I lived, Dynasty sold well, but in Chicago, it killed the band. The disco song killed the band. Looking back now, it sounds ridiculous because now that might be arguably their most popular song, the way it's streaming on Spotify. But anyway, so Unmasked is released, and I was quite disappointed, but I stuck with the band, and it was very poppy. And this goes with Creatures of the Night. I knew by being a Kiss fan that Peter Criss was not on Unmasked. I didn't know that on Dynasty, but on Masked, I knew that double bass drum. I'm like, this is a different drummer. So then The Elder gets released, and that's a whole weird thing. So in the interim, Kiss is like this. They are rock bottom in the United States. Their popularity is no longer there. Other bands have eclipsed them. People are now in the Rush, AC/DC, Judas Priest. I mean, then the new wave of British heavy metal hits, and new bands like Iron Maiden come out, Def Leppard. So Kiss is at bottom of the barrel. And in the interim, you're reading Paul Stanley's doing interviews with Kerrang, which is good. Fairly popular, very popular heavy metal album. But he's also doing interviews with like fanzines, like independent fanzines, like Kick-Ass Monthly and that. And you're hearing bits and pieces about this next album is going to be really heavy. So I'm trying to think of, the timeline. We're expecting this heavy album, and then this comes out. And the album cover alone just blows my mind. But my first impression is there is no Ace Frehley on this album. I love the songs. I love that they're back being a heavy rock band, but there's no Ace Frehley on it. Even though he's on the cover, there's no Ace Frehley. And you start hearing, see, it gets murky for me. I wish I had a lot of these magazines and fanzines, because you were hearing, is he in a car accident? He's in the band, but he's not in the band. We went to go see him live on this tour. We didn't know if he was going to be at the show or not. So that's my very first impression. Great songs, but no Ace Frehley.
Yeah. Look, it's a little bit deceiving, isn't it? And I think with the Kiss story, who plays on it and who doesn't play on it is always a bit of a mystery. And this album's no different. Look, in Australia, Dynasty, they were royalty. They were given the keys to the town hall in Sydney. Unmasked was huge, but Elder, they could barely get arrested. I have never seen more albums returned. You go to the bargain bins in front of the various record stores, they were selling for 99 cents and they still couldn't sell it. Then there was a kind of a compilation album called Killers, which is quite interesting, which was a bit of a mismatch, not a mismatch, that's not the right word, but a merge of old and new. And some of the new songs were quite interesting.
And it was only in the United States. Yeah, it was it was released as an import.
Yep. And this album came out, but I have to say it really just, people were off the Kiss bandwagon fully in Australia, and it didn't really make much of an impact other than maybe some of the I Love It Loud. We may have seen that video clip occasionally, late night TV, but otherwise, I think Kiss were way uncool in the 80s around this period of time.
Definitely.
So my exposure to this album was very minimal. I purchased it much later, and boy, I sort of regret it because it is a great album.
Yeah, I mean, I had my little circle of heavy metal fans, and what was cool about Kiss not being that popular is they all of a sudden kind of fit into that mold of these other bands that we only liked, like this band that was coming out from San Francisco called Metallica. We had this demo tape called Metal Up Your Ass. That's even before the Kill 'Em All album came out. So we're listening to these bands, Merciful Fate and all these other bands, and then Kiss is kind of in that fold because they are not popular. And I've told this story many times. I started dating a girl in college. It was nothing serious, but she wanted to go to a party. And I said, no, I'm going to Dubuque, Iowa to see Kiss. And she dumped me. That's how I lost a girlfriend over going to a Kiss show. Think of it now. That's unfathomable, right?
Yeah, but do you want to do a quick shout out to her?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I know. It's interesting because I just saw Joe Perry Project. That's another discussion. He played a song off of Rocks that also didn't sit well with a girl when I sang it to her. But anyway, I bought this album when it was released. I was very excited about it, but yeah, my hopes of them being big again were not to come to fruition.
Yeah, not fulfilled.
I didn't mind, but I told you right before we went on the air, we drove, they were playing, they skipped Chicago. They played Rockford, Illinois, Dubuque, Iowa. Dubuque, Iowa maybe is the 5th largest city in Iowa, right? They didn't play Cedar Rapids or Des Moines. So we drove 2 hours in the snow to go to the show. Plasmatics opened up. It was probably the best concert I've ever been to, but I don't even know if there were 2,000 people there. And that's how low on the totem pole they were. But, you bring up the popularity in Australia. They were playing on, not on MTV. They also dropped the ball with that I Love It Loud. I believe it was promoted very poorly. They thought that MTV should be paying them to play the video. Just totally missing the boat on, the exposure. But there was another rock show on USA Cable, and they would constantly play Detroit Rock City from one of the Australia shows. So we were by seeing that, we were like, as hardcore Kiss fans, there weren't much of us left, but we were dying to see Eric Carr play live, because the only exposure we had is when they were on Fridays and they played those couple songs. That was a Saturday Night Live knockoff. But so we were excited about that too. We were excited about hearing Eric Carr on an album, the bombastic drums. And there was the whole mystery about Ace Frehley being in the band, not being in the band. But as an album, it's outstanding. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go through some quick stats, and then maybe we can just spotlight some songs, and we'll just take it in turns. So this hit number 45 in the US charts. It has attained gold status, but I suspect, Joe, over a considerable period of time, it sort of crawled to gold status. Interesting, it did much better in the UK, number 22. Now, UK appears to have caught onto the Kiss train much later. They have been quite supporters of Kiss in the 80s, a little bit more by proportion of population comparative to America. So they don't mind the Kiss in the 80s comparatively. In Australia, it hit number 33 and then probably sunk without a trace. So you had the core elements of the band of Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Eric Carr, and Vinnie Vincent. Another very important sort of piece of this whole Kiss chapter comes in. He plays guitar on 6 of the songs. So I don't know if you can call him a fully fledged member. He was sort of like transitioning. Oh, sorry, wrong word. But he's coming into the band. And there's some other guitarists. They've brought in outside songwriters, and some of the outside songwriters have really added a bit of a spark to the creativity, the songwriting craft, the sound. So, yeah, mate, hit me with your first song on this album, and we'll take it from there. What's the first song you want to spotlight?
The opening track, Creatures of the Night. It just right off the boom. Because, even with the Elder, the Oath, I was like, boom, they're back. And then you listen to the rest of the album and it's like, okay, this is weird. They're back even stronger, and the whole rest of the album rocks. So Creatures of the Night is just an outstanding track. Steve Ferris from Mr. Mister almost joined the band. He's one of the many guitarists that they marched in and out for interviews, and he plays the lead on this. And but right off the bat, I knew it wasn't Ace Frehley. It sounded weird to me, but the song as an opener is outstanding. It's friggin' great. And the drumming, you realize, okay, they're going for this big bombastic drum sound, and I like it. It's not Peter Criss. It's a guy that bashes the drums. Interesting story. I heard an interview with Michael James Jackson. I believe he just recently passed away, but Gene Simmons always has these things, but he comes in, he goes to Michael James Jackson. He goes, I want Eric Carr to sound like John Bonham. And he goes, that's impossible. And he's like, why? He goes, he's not John Bonham, but they went for that big bombastic sound, which I love. And it's throughout the album, but Creatures right off the bat, boom, you're hitting a home run, and it just keeps on going.
Yeah, look, I think Eric Carr's playing on this album is absolutely fantastic. And that is the takeout of this album. The drum sound is absolutely huge. And I've got an interesting story about how they recorded the drums with through Michael James Jackson. So what they used to be very very sort of precise where they would put the drums in the studio to get the best sound. And they wanted a widescreen sound. So that was on one element. They were recording it in the studio. At the Power Station Studios in New York, there was a defunct elevator shaft. So what they would do, they would send the sounds of the drum into the elevator shaft, and they would put a tube microphone way up high in the elevator shaft so that the sound would pick up the huge sounds of the drum. So Michael Jackson, or Michael James Jackson, would mix the sounds in the studio with the sounds in the elevator shaft, and that's how they created this big, bombastic John Bonham sound. I think that's amazing. And there's more to it, but that's simplistically how they were able to get that really huge drum sound. And I don't think Eric Carr has sounded better, because subsequent albums, it went to a more traditional sound. And yeah, I think
even more frantic. I don't know if you've heard the latest off the soundboard from Poughkeepsie, New York, but he's like all over the place, and they started playing too fast. And I agree with you 100%. This is Eric Carr at his finest.
Absolutely. And he was really engaged. In fact, the thing I like about this album is everyone feels like they're engaged. So there's none of this later. You can't point the finger at Gene and say, oh, he's thinking about his movie career. I think they were all focused that this is the comeback album. We've got to, let's get going. Let's get to work. And they're really just on the ball in regards to it. I think that's a great track. And I think Steve Ferris, that's how you pronounce it, he's got the best lead break off the whole album. It's such a tasty lead. He's got this beautiful sustain. He bends the strings, and it's just a wonderful song. And it's another co-write between Paul Stanley and Adam Mitchell, who wrote for John Waite, Wendy O. Williams, and Chicago. So they're bringing in all these outside songwriters, but it actually works. As we go further in the show, you'll see some more testimonies. So,
yes.
All right. Well, I've actually chimed in and said that was my pick as well. So I'll throw it over to you. What's your next pick that you want to?
So I'm going to go bookends. The last song in the album is War Machine. And it's become a live staple. It's now the song, instead of Firehouse, it's the song where Gene breathes fire on this current tour. And it's just it's a great song. It's Gene being mean. It's got that great, War Machine. How more heavy metal can you get? It's got a great riff. It's one of the songs that Vincent Cusano, Vinnie Vincent wrote. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's perfect that this album starts off with Creatures of the Night and ends with War Machine, and is in between is a bunch of great songs. So that's what makes the album great. So War Machine is definitely my next pick. I'm not even saying I like Creature of the Night better. They're equally as great, but you got a Paul song and a Gene song, and it's excellent.
I think we're following a lot of the same picks, so I'll just do my response in regards to it. I picked War Machine as well, co-written by Bryan Adams. So Bryan Adams was an aspiring Canadian rock musician, didn't necessarily like metal, but he somehow got connected with Gene Simmons, and he wrote some of their greatest songs, co-wrote. But I think this is, to get an outside writer and do a song that perfectly fits Gene Simmons, because I love the Gene Simmons that's the God of Thunder. I don't like the Gene Simmons that's talking about putting a log in a fireplace.
Exactly.
I want him to be this demonic character, God of Thunder, for whatever, and this suits him to a T. And Vinnie Vincent plays all the guitars. It's great. And also written by Jim Vallance. I think this is a great album. And the album is really wonderfly sequenced. Just like you said, bookend.
So, there's a comedian, Russell Peters, he's Canadian. And there is a YouTube clip out there where he meets Bryan Adams backstage, and he asks him to play War Machine because he was a Kiss fan. And it's really cool. It's really cool. And Bryan Adams, like, I've never played this song before. And he just picks up an acoustic guitar, starts noodling, and all of a sudden they're like, and then I think Russell Peters actually sings, "You better watch out." Yeah, it's great.
Well, he wrote the song.
Yeah,
you would hope you'd hope he knows it. No, that's good. All right. Well, that was my response to that one. What's your next one?
So I have to go with "I Love It Loud," another song. People say it's overplayed. They play it live, but it stands the test of time. The drum beats an anthem at sporting events. You hear it all the time. So, they're obviously, it's become a household, well-known drum beat because they constantly play it at sporting events. But I just think it's a great song. And, I heard Gene Simmons. I actually talked to Ron Keel, and Ron Keel said when he talked to Gene said, you just keep it simple. And him and Vinnie and Gene basically took the riff from a Who song and slowed it down, and it melded into "I Love It Loud." And they said, copying is the best form of flattery, and that's how it came. But it's a fantastic anthem. I hear people, I'm sick of hearing it live because they play it live all the time, but it doesn't. The reason it's so great is because it is played so much, and it's still a great song. It's simple, but it kicks ass, and the drums are amazing.
Yeah, that was another one of my selections. Vinny does all the guitars. It's another co-write. Whatever you want to say about Vinnie Vincent, he's a great songwriter. He's got chops, and his songs really propped up Kiss in the early 80s. And even with the that comeback with the absolutely, Revenge. So he's got the chops. I think it's a bit disingenuous that the video has Ace Frehley. because there was a
and
contractual obligation.
it was a contractual thing because they went to Polygram. That Casablanca. This was the last album on Casablanca, and it was bought by Polygram, and their contract said they had to have 3 original members, or they would have to restructure their contract. And so they tried to keep Ace in the band as much as possible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he didn't want to have a bar to do with that, but it must have been a struggle to get him to the video. I think it's a little bit weird that you're in a video, but you don't actually play on the songs.
Right.
But that's all part of the Kiss story.
It was like a promo thing. I think it was in Los Angeles, and he's wearing his elder costume where the rest of the guys have their new costumes on.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird too. But like I said, we didn't know if he was in the band or not because there was no internet, and we were reading Kerrang, and they're saying he's in a car accident and he's going to probably come back on tour. So we're driving 2 hours to this concert, and it took us, and we're like, wait a minute, that's not Ace Frehley. That's this new guy, Vinnie Vincent. We weren't we were kind of disappointed because, Paul was giving interviews before this album about the live show, and he's saying that Rocket Ride would be in the set list and, it'd be heavy. And don't get me wrong, this is the greatest concert I've ever been to, this Creatures of the Night show, but we were kind of disappointed Ace wasn't there because we were such Ace fans and he was so integral to the sound, but they still delivered, and it was still a great show. So the rest is history.
Absolutely, as they say. Do you think Ace's guitar would have suited these songs? Because he's a very Rolling Stones, Keith Richards. He's got that sort of classic 70s rock feel, where this is a little bit more getting to the 80s and a little bit more electrically charged, a little bit more,
Yeah, but it's more, it's still more subdued. It's not, it's not the hair sound or fast sound. So I think he would have sounded great on this. And I know he did Rock and Roll Hell on one of his Origins albums, and it sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Well, he's actually said in interviews that he would have loved to have played on some of these songs, and that's a regret of his. So
yeah.
But I think I Love It Loud's the best song on the album. If I had to do a ranking, that would be at the top. It's a classic. What I really love, I love that fade out at the end, and then it comes back. It's like they were trying to replicate Helter Skelter, the Beatles, where it just fades out and comes back. I think that's so effective. Thunderous drums. Again, you've got the God of Thunder personer or the 4-personer. That suits Gene Simmons to a T.
It's my third favorite. Well, I would say Creatures and War Machine are 1A and 1B. So Live Love It Loud is 2. But the fact that you say it's the best song, I can't argue with you because, like I said, it gets played to death live, at least. And you hear the drum beat all the time at sporting events in the United States, but it's still a great song. So I can't argue with your pick at all.
Yeah.
It totally stands the test of time.
Yeah, no worries. What's your next pick?
Okay, this is going to be tough. I'm going to go with Danger. I just like, I'm going to go to Paul Stanley song. I think it's a really cool song. And I like the guitar work. I like the beat of it. It's just a great, it's Paul's second favorite song of mine on the album. So I'm going to go with Danger for sure.
Yeah, that's a great track. I didn't pick that as one of my 5, but that is really, it's got a lot of drama and a really good vocal.
I was gonna Keep Me Coming. I almost picked because at first it goes in and I'm like, okay, this no, but I don't know. Maybe that's the only song in the album that. Well, I Still Love You. I'm not a big fan of, but I like it, but Keep Me Coming kind of has not stood the test of time. I'm not saying it's a bad song, but Danger has surpassed it as a Paul song in this album.
I think the lyrics are a bit risque, bit Jamie Gillis, but
Kisses.
Yeah, that's part of their template. That's part of their template. Yeah. I put Rock and Roll Hell I like that.
It's a great
It's a
song.
co-write with Brian Adams and Jim Valance. It was originally recorded by Bachman Turner Overdrive. I've
One of the
listened to that. I've listened to the
yeah
song, and that's kind of like a really beige boogie by numbers. So they are inspired to take a song, slow it down, different lyrics, and make it brooding, menacing. And Gene Simmons sings with so much conviction. Why couldn't he continue that throughout the rest of the 80s? I mean,
I know.
he's really switched on. But that is
Yeah.
a really good song. And, you know, what sounds like quite an average song with BTO, and they turn it into something really like a diamond.
Yeah. No, I agree with it. That would be my next pick now. It's interesting because BTO is like one of the bands that I was into before I got into Kiss, and then I just went crazy. But I always liked that heavier stuff. Like Not Fragile was,
Yeah.
was an album, one of my first albums. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you now: do you think he's singing about Ace Frehley? They never, it's always murky, but some of the lyrics kind of really cut deep.
Maybe.
And yeah, and then
maybe.
Ace actually does it on his album, so maybe he knew it was about himself. I don't know. Yeah,
I can tell you the Kiss story, even to this very day, is I cannot keep up with they're in, they're out. They get on, they don't get on.
yeah.
Countersuing, suing, we love you.
Right.
It's just sort of up and down.
The latest drama with Ace Frehley, and he was going to drop all these bombshells, and now he's backing off. And he said Paul called him and just said "F you" and hung up. And
I think the chances of Ace playing on that farewell show at Madison are 1,000,000 to 1. They say
no, there's no reason for him to play. It's already sold out. And I've been to shows where people think it's Ace Frehley. There's the hardcores like us, but there's a lot of casuals that go to the show just to see the show. And they know Paul and Gene. But if you listen to the lyrics of Rock and Roll Hell, I mean, he's directing it at someone, and if it was towards Ace Frehley and them getting angry that his problems led to their contract dispute, with Polygram, I could see it. Gene being directed that way. Yeah. So that's my next pick. So
absolutely. And when you when we talk about the bonus discs in the box set, and namely this one, it's interesting to hear how this song has been workshopped quite a few times. I think they've done quite a few versions of this song, and it pops up on this bonus CD. And it's interesting to see how it sort of metamorphoses into its current version.
Definitely.
All right. Over to you. That was my choice.
Well, my choice was Rock and Roll Hell as well.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, back to me.
Yes.
I'll go.
Yes.
I Still Love You. I know it should be the sort of song that, people go, it's sappy and ballady, but I think Paul actually has got some emotion in this song. And he really has conviction in the lyrics, and he delivers it in spades. And I put this along with Sure Know Something, where it's one of the Kiss songs that actually, it's a matter of the heart. And I think it's quite a genuine, authentic song. There's emotion there. So I don't know what was happening in Paul's life, but he really sings his balls off.
2 songs about Donna Dixon. I think this is I like 1,000,000 to 1 better, but he lost Donna Dixon to Dan Aykroyd, and that's where the song comes from.
Yeah, but I think he really sings his ass off on this one. He really
does.
He's going for it. Yeah. So you're a little bit 50-50 on this. Do you think it's a little bit too sappy for you, or?
It's too sappy. It's too slow. Don't get me wrong. It's not filler. I still like the song. It fits in with the album. But if I had to choose, if I had a gun to my head, I would choose I Still Love You as my least favorite song. I mean, and they played it live on these next 2 tours. I think they played it on Lick It Up as well. Yeah, but they definitely played it on the Creatures tour. But yeah, I mean, it's my least favorite song on a great album.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well,
still,
that doesn't. Yeah, that means it's.
yeah,
It doesn't.
right.
Interesting. The guitar work was done by Robin Ford, and you look at his
Yeah,
CV, and man, he's done a bit. He played with Miles Davis, George Harrison, and Joni Mitchell. So they've got some really
he said
top-notch
this
musos
was.
on this.
Yeah, I heard an interview with him, and he said this was totally out of his wheelhouse. Obviously, says it was the strangest gig he ever had, but he enjoyed it, and
Yep.
it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting they brought him in for this.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a masterclass in Eric Carr drumming. Listen to it, all the little fills. Yeah, he's kind of the most valuable player on this album because, going back to the sound, the sonic sound of this album. What's the takeout? The drums, isn't it?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any others you want to spotlight? Because I was going to wanted to talk a little bit about this off the box set. So
Well, no, let's go into it because the box set is absolutely amazing. I got mine here too. It's just it just blew my mind. There's times where the band lets you down, and there's times where the band hits a grand slam, and they hit a grand slam with this one. Holy cow. I mean, just and the material that's inside the book with all the dates, and aside from
it's meticulous. It is great.
They have a poster from the show I went to in Dubuque, Iowa, in there. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
A lot of love and care, because some of those box sets can be rip-offs and just rehashing, but this is really pandering to the fans in a positive way. They're just giving them what they want.
Because Gene, especially Gene, he's always complaining about lack of record sales for certain albums, but it's obviously an important album. I think even more so to Paul Stanley, I think, gets it. I'm guessing that Paul had a lot of input on this, and I just am just so grateful that they did a box set for this album that initially didn't sell that well, and as you said, it took a while to go gold. But they play 2 songs in their set list now, still on the end of the road tour.
Yeah.
And it's a very important album because it got him back on track.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's fantastic.
Yeah. So what I want to spotlight is this outtakes CD. So it's called Demos, Rarities, and Outtakes. And there's a couple of songs there that there's a number of times at different versions, and you can see that they were really heavily workshopping it, and they were in the frame for this album, but didn't make it. Now, one of them is called Feels Like Heaven. And to me, it's like Gene's still going out with Cher and listening to all this boogie music in Studio 54. It's completely out of it.
I don't know if you ever heard the Gene Simmons Vault, but it reminds me of some of the stuff you hear on that.
Yeah, I haven't. It's a little bit expensive for me. I'm sorry. I don't have room to put it in the shelves.
I'll make sure Gene. Okay, you can come after me. I'll make sure you get it. So, but I mean, it's been years, but I'll email you. But I know it's fascinating. So the songs, what blows my mind is Not for the Innocent, which I think is better than the Lick It Up version because I love the back and forth vocals, and I wish they would have kept it that way. I love when you all sing together instead of just one guy. I just think it's so incredibly kick-ass. It's My Life. Now it's interesting because there's so many versions of It's My Life. This sounds almost exactly like the Wendy O. Williams version. And someone told me, and as you know, I'm obsessed with that album, but someone told me that a lot of that album, I don't know, there's different stories, but someone told me that someone she just sang over some demos, and this almost sounds like it was because it sounds almost exactly the same with Gene singing. But it's a great song, and you wonder if that could have been a hit single if it was included on this album. I've heard people say that as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have hurt to put this on the album. I don't know why it was ever held off. Gene
Mm,
Simmons is not happy about it. When I saw him play solo,
yep.
he ripped in the Paul Stanley for not ever releasing "It's My Life." But yeah, that and what is another song there?
I'm gonna spotlight
Yeah, no,
Partners
go
in
ahead. Yeah,
Crime. Partners in Crime could easily
yes,
go on this album. It's
yeah,
it fits Paul to a T. So this is an Adam Mitchell, Paul Stanley number. Yeah, it's got a nice Paul Stanley lead. I like the melody line. It just, yeah, I think it fits theme wise really well into this album. Whereas you've got something like Feels Like Heaven, which is more of the Dynasty era, the late
yeah,
70s, where they were
right.
exploring that disco Studio 54 type feel. I don't know why Gene was going down that direction, but apparently Gene was doing a lot of work with all these sort of drum machines and 2-track recorders, and a lot of the ideas would come out of that. And would it be fair to say a lot of the material in the Gene Simmons vault sounds like feels like heaven?
It's very well. No, I mean it's all over the place 'cause it's all different eras. There's stuff that sounds like feels like heaven, but there's also like the Love Gun songs that he did with the Van Halen brothers. I mean, but
Yep.
it's very demo-ish, and a lot of it is you can understand why it's not on albums. And then you
Yep.
get things like, Domino. Do you want to hear Domino without Bruce Kulick's solo? It's stuff like that. So
Yeah.
don't want to get sidetracked, but this, when I heard that, I said, this belongs on the vault.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep. Yep.
Well,
But it's a nice curio, isn't it? It's an interesting curio. Yeah.
another song that blows my mind is Deadly Weapon.
Yep. Yep.
Great. I love it. I love both the versions on there, the original demo and the Penny Lane demo. I just think it's a great song. So
They could slot in. They could slot in.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
And you wonder, so my question to you is like, would "It's My Life" or a Deadly Weapon save this album, or were they just dead to rights and they had to take the makeup off?
I think they had so many good songs. I think it was really tough to whittle it down to the final song selection. So I reckon there's about a couple of songs that could have made it. But I don't know. I think it was probably not. Maybe it was the wrong year. Some people say that, okay, if they waited the next year, 1983, where you have Metal Health, Shout at the Devil, and Heavy Metal Starts to Explode, this album may have made more impact in that year than 1982. What do you think about that school of thought?
I don't know. It's such a interesting and strange period in history for me, but I'm fascinated by it. I don't know. They were just seen, hard to believe, young people that are watching this, but they were seen as so uncool at the time. And then you bring up like a Motley Crue, so they're wearing makeup, but they're playing a heavier brand, a stranger brand of music, kind of a hybrid Van Halen, Sweet, whatever. But they're younger too, younger, hungrier band. I don't know. I think that the makeup coming off and Lick It Up resonating. I think
that did much better though. That did much better.
Yeah, I think that's what brought them back. Definitely. But I don't know if anything could have saved this album, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because they were just, you mentioned Kiss and people would laugh at you.
Yeah.
And that's the way it went,
Yeah.
I think you needed MTV and Airplay, and somehow they dropped the ball on both of those. And
So The Elder was probably, that really cruel this album's chances, because I think a lot of people probably got burned with The Elder. There was just left a lot of bad tastes in people's mouths.
But even with The Elder, it didn't make a blip at all. I think especially where I lived after Dynasty, no one wanted anything to do with Kiss except for me.
Yeah.
That seems hard to believe for people too, because it's multi-platinum and I Was Made for Loving You was a gigantic hit. But
Well, they
Yeah.
didn't tour. They didn't tour over the Elder, and I think I know the Kiss fans will correct me if I'm wrong. I think they only did one show in America on Unmasked.
Yeah, it was the introduction of Eric Carr, and it was at the Palladium, which is a small venue in New York, where, the previous tour, they were selling out 2-3 nights at Madison Square Garden. They played the Palladium with Eric Carr, and then they go over to Australia and Europe. So, yeah.
Yep.
But they decided to tour for Creatures, and the attendance wasn't there. It was brutal.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, like I said, there weren't a lot of people at this show, but they played like they were in a stadium.
Yeah, absolutely.
You look at the footage. So there's that famous footage when they played down in Brazil, and they got those huge crowds in Brazil at the end of this tour. They played the same way at that show as they did when I saw them in Dubuque, Iowa.
Yep.
So it didn't matter how many people were in the crowd. They put on a show.
Yeah. Yeah. Mate, I want to talk about Vinnie Vincent. So we can't not get through this episode and not talk about Vinnie Vincent, because he's an integral part of the Kiss history. And there's the album, a little bit
signature.
Yeah, we see it there. There's a lot of he's such a polarizing character, isn't he? Because some people say that he was very critically important to Kiss's resurrection in the 80s, and a lot of people downplay his importance in the Kiss story. More so, maybe they related to his current behavior and a lot of the tabloid type of stories that have come out in the last 20 years. What's your views about Vinnie and his importance in the Kiss history?
He's extremely important. So I'm going to we did an episode on another channel about him, and you proposed the topic. So I don't want to talk about my current feelings about him. I'm going to talk about my feelings about him at this juncture. He definitely helped them out on this album. I think it was a matter of necessity. They were desperate to find a guitarist. You read that. What blows my mind is how many guitarists they interviewed and passed on, and then they settle for Vinnie Vincent, and they're not happy with it.
Yeah.
There's an interview with Punky Meadows from Angel, which I don't know how they would have pulled it off, because, everyone knows what he would look like without the makeup. But anyway, and they said
even that Doug Aldridge, Doug Aldridge from Whitesnake. Apparently he was 18 or very young. He auditioned for the band.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't know. But that being said, he wrote some great songs, and then he really turned it up a notch on Lick It Up. He wrote most of the great songs on that album, and he plays. Oh, interesting enough, he does not play the lead on Exciter. That's Rick Derringer, and that's arguably maybe the best lead. But he plays some, like, I think his lead on they talk about how he can play like Jeff Beck when he's slow, and he decided he wanted to be Gene described it perfectly. He wanted to be Yngwie on crack. And when I hear Invasion, I think he's Yngwie on crack. I don't know. But anyway, I think the leads on All Hell's Breaking Loose and A Million to One are very tasteful. Yeah. And if he would have stayed in that realm, that's great.
Yeah.
But you cannot downplay his importance in history. You can't. Yeah.
I'm fond of Vinnie, and I kind of defend him a little bit. I think he's very important, and I think that Gene and Paul basically set some really strict ground rules about the recording. And come on, calm down. Let's just put your guitar work to service the song, not your guitar shredding to overpower. But what I want to ask you is, you saw him live. I haven't had the sort of the opportunity to see Vinnie live. What was he like in concert? Was he a bit over the top, or was he sort of playing the right role?
Listen, you bring up the box set. Listen to the live show, because one of the shows was near. They play Sioux City, that's Iowa, and they play Rockford, so that was very near to when I saw them on that tour. And you can tell his leads. I remember hearing some of the leads, and I'm like, okay, this isn't what Ace plays. But I was so blown away by the rest of the show, it didn't bother me that much. But then he like played the one small lead on when they sing Firehouse. No, no, no. And Ace skipped playing that for years. So I thought that was kind of strange that he did that. But now listening to the demos and thinking back to the show, it was kind of like his leads didn't fit with the songs. He was just like bumblebeeing over, the songs. As a performer and everything else, we didn't care. It was a great show. Gene Paul was there. We saw Eric Carr on a tank that shot, it exploded. So we were all so blown away by that. The disappointment of not seeing Ace Frehley was kind of in the background. But if you listen to the live songs on the box set, his leads don't. In my opinion, his leads don't fit. And then you talk about. I just don't understand what they were trying to do with guitarists in this era. And finally, Bruce Kulick found his groove, maybe around Revenge, But then they get the guy like Mark St. John, which was even worse. I don't. But then I don't know. They're trying to get an Eddie Van Halen, or do they want a slower Jimmy Page style guitarist? I don't know. But yeah, Vinnie. So to answer your question, we were disappointed Ace was there, but the show was so great we didn't care that much. His leads really didn't fit, but if you listen to the box set, it's of my opinion that the leads really do not fit in the live recordings.
Yeah. Sometimes you've got a car and you put a souped up motor in a smallish car, and it just doesn't fit. I don't know. Maybe that's the analogy. He wasn't sort of sonically live. He wasn't right for the band. Yeah, but as a songwriter,
he's great with Kiss again. And then he did a song with the Bangles. But we're just staying in this time frame. We're not talking what happened. But you hear stories. There's the one story. It was Mark Slaughter talking about they're on tour with Iron Maiden, and he's playing. They're backstage, and Vinnie Vincent's playing Jeff Beck leads for Dave Murray and Adrian Smith, and they're like, "Why don't you play like that on stage?" He's like, "I just want to play fast," and I can't process that. I think if he would have stayed in that Jeff Beck, slower, groovier realm, it would have fit. Like you hear a little bit of that, I think, on 1,000,000 to 1 and All Hell's Breaking Loose. So, I would have liked to just slow down a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really funny. Like his duration in the band was very small. He wasn't there a long time, but he's one of the most talked about characters in the band, and to this very day, they it keeps rolling on. Look, I think, folks, if you love this album and you're a fan, it's a great box set. It's one of the best box sets that I've come across. Beautifully put together.
Oh, it's pricey. The price has come down, I believe, but I paid full price when it first came out, and it's worth every penny. There's value. There's absolute value here. For sure. They knocked it out of the park and then some. Absolutely.
All right, mate. Well, I think finally we'll just wrap it up. Just tell us, where do you think this fits in the overall discography of Kiss? Where do you rank it?
So my favorite, I have to put Alive outside because it's a live album. But they took those first 3 albums and they beefed up those. I can't listen to the first 3 albums because the production's so poor. Hotter Than Hell is amazing, but it sounds like it's in a tin can. Studio albums, Hotter Than Hell's up there. Rock and Roll Over probably is my number 1 studio album, but this is probably 2 or 3. It's up there with Hotter Than Hell and Rock and Roll Over for sure. It was like, now they're actually back. When I put The Elder on and I heard The Oath, I remember saying, okay, they're back. Well, this is getting kind of weird. Then I put, I get this, I'm reading all the articles in Kerrang and the fanzines, and I'm like, okay, they're back. This is, they're playing heavy rock, heavy metal, and my band, I can, they're back. So it's definitely a top three studio album for me.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I think it's top three for me. I like the first Kiss album, even though I forgive a lot of the production, but the songs are just so great. I just roll with it. But
No,
I think,
I totally agree with you. It's just that on Alive, they beefed up the production. I mean, Alive is basically a studio album. They just beefed up all those songs so much I can't listen to the studio versions. You know what I mean? But go on. I'm sorry.
No. Anyway, I think it's top three, and it's their best album of the '80s, heads and shoulders. And look, I think it's. I've really enjoyed this chat with you, Joe. Always great having you on the channel, and this has just been a fun hour to talk about Kiss, free flowing, and it's just so easy to talk to you about this topic that I think the viewers can just tell that you love so much. And sometimes they disappoint us, but most times, they do the right thing,
exactly.
And their music lives on. So,
and anytime you want me on, Peter, it's always a pleasure. This is so much fun, and
absolutely.
your topics are awesome, man. So yeah, whatever you want me for, I'm here.
We'll do something. Don't you worry about that. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think of this album. And look, leave your comments, because we really enjoy reading your comments. And guarantee me and Joe B will be doing a show very soon. Cheers.